How's everyone doing tonight? We're live. I got John Felicetti as a co-host, and we're here with Phil Tremper. How are you doing tonight?
Pretty good.
So, when did you first get into reptiles?
Well, I've been into reptiles pretty much my entire life, but uh, you know, I'd say I took it really seriously starting in the mid 1980s, and it's just taken off from there. It's I've just met so many cool people and have had the privilege of working with a lot of different reptiles, especially lizards, uh, and travel to quite a few different areas in that too, especially over to Europe. And um, but yeah, but like as far as like taking it really seriously and all that probably started, I'd say maybe 1988, and it's really just taken off from there.
What did you start with back then?
Back then, it was primarily geckos of the genus Phelsuma, the day geckos, and there really wasn't a lot of people back then, keeping various different lizards in that. So I kind of had you know the gecko bug, you should say, and that lasted quite a while. I'm still interested in geckos, and yeah, and still have worked with a lot of different species of them. But back then, it was all pretty much the day geckos, and I think I started out with maybe about, I'd say, like 11 or 13 different species. And, probably one of my more favorite ones was Phelsuma abedi because I'll never forget seeing a picture in this one publication of an Aldabra tortoise and having a Phelsuma abedi on its shell and, picking bugs off. And I just thought that was
That is
cool
cool.
to see.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was from there I just gradually started getting into different other lizards and that, but yeah, it's been a pretty cool ride so far.
And
So
then,
I got segue to that. Why did you get into Tiliqua?
uh
What made that decision?
well, I can tell you this, that the very you, you know back then there wasn't too many publications there. Okay, for one thing, there was no internet. There was no Facebook or Instagram to share pictures, stuff like that. It was pretty limited. And the few books that you had were the Tropical Fish Hobbyists, or the TFH books. And there's two or three of them that were specifically on different lizards. And there was, I think there's some black and white photos in one of them. It's like an encyclopedia that uh, had like shinglebacks, some Magurnias, and one or two Tiliquas. But I think what really hit it for me was that um, it had to have been back in 19, I think it was 1986, maybe 1985, something like that. I was at the Brookfield Zoo. It's south of Chicago, and in their herpetarium, they have all these, or at least back then, they had all these huge vertical cages that surrounded the outside of the main room. And you never knew what you were going to see. But there was one day that I went up to one of them. There's obviously nothing, didn't even look like nothing was in it, and but there actually was. There was this hollowed out log. It was probably a half log, and I looked down at the nameplate. It said Tiliqua nigra, and I just stood there looking at it, trying to see if anything was going to move because I really didn't know what it was. And all of a sudden, here comes this. It was like a sub-adult. It wasn't quite an adult. It was a Alpine Blotch, and it just the way that it moved, the colors on it especially, it was just had that deep mauve color with these bright, perfect, like salmon blotches on its back, flicking that blue tongue out, just looking around. And I thought, wow, that right there, that is one of my bucket list animals. And I probably watched that thing for about a good hour. Yeah, just staying in that herpetarium. But that left a pretty long impression. But I really didn't pick up my first blue tongue until I think it was like 1990. It was in 1990. It was at the very first Breeders Expo down in Florida. I remember going down there. That's when it was in Orlando, and it was still small. And there was a vendor down there that had some baby, pure Northerns, and the typical Northerns too. There was, there were no different morphs back then. Just a beautiful pumpkin orange, bars on its side, black bars, and just gorgeous. And I remember picking one of them up and a baby sulcata tortoise, and bringing
Nice.
it back and coming back on the plane, because back then people really didn't ship too much. And I just stuck it I wore a coat, stuck it in my front pocket, and got on the plane. I'll never forget. There was this across the aisle. There was this old lady. She saw something poking out of my jacket, and there it was baby blue, baby intermediate, and the thing just wanted to get out. But yeah, I wasn't gonna let open it up the bag and all that, and let people see what
Some
I had.
skinks on a plane.
Yeah, exactly. No, but that was like the first one that I ever had, and that was a good animal. And but then I think it was probably like in '93. Yeah, it was after I got married. My wife and we picked up some more Northerns, and we lived in a small apartment. And there's times, you know how blue tongues are. They're nomadic. They need to exercise. They need to have stimuli, and so we would just let them walk around in the apartment. And we had the windows came all the way, the sills came all the way down to the floor. So there's plenty of times they would actually sit on those sills, just warming themselves up like in the sun, just watching traffic go by or something. That was pretty cool.
That's one thing I'm definitely noticing. Because I have some big windows, and a lot of the pits are up against the windows, and these sun patches come in, and they'll choose, basically 100% of the time they choose the sun patch over the basking spot.
Yeah.
It's very interesting, and that's why I always like to observe what's going on, and this is something that I'll take when I go to build another detached building, and try to put those things into play. I think you said you saw it yourself, that you saw the animal literally kind of direct itself, almost if it's knowing that the sun is there, and it's very interesting watching that behavior for sure.
Yeah, it's visually stimulating for them, and they know it's instinct that's kicking
Yep.
in.
So your first breeding, was it planned or like accidental, them roaming around?
Well, I didn't breed them. I only had those particular animals. I think I only had them for let me think here, probably 2 years, and they were just getting to be of that breeding age and size, and then we moved, and I had to part with them. So yeah, and then I really didn't get back into blue tongues. Um, Geez, it probably was like the year 2000. Yeah, there was a considerable amount of time that went by because I was basically more focused on working with as many different species of geckos, back then. And back then, especially the '90s, there was probably a good handful of importers, exporters, or animal dealer or reptile dealers in the United States, and they would send out these price lists every month. And some of the more memorable ones was Louis Porras of Zoo Herp out in Utah. There's Ron Tremper. He was out in California. And then there was Glades Herp down in Fort Myers, and also Tom Crutchfield. And there was a couple others as well too. smaller ones, but they would always get in like different Madagascar species and different Asian species of geckos or African species, and it was just like a huge smorgasbord of animal species that were just coming in, and they really weren't that expensive. And there was myself and probably a good handful of guys and a few gals as well too, like Julie Bergman, that we would just try and get our hands on as much stuff as we could. And I mean, it was addicting, I believe, I'll admit it. But
back when I was, go ahead.
Yeah, but it was pretty cool to work with all these different geckos that you can't get anymore now. I mean, there's no way, especially like some of your Teratoscincus, the frog-eyed geckos, because there's so many sanctions that are that took place around the early 2000s in the Middle East, and so there's just don't see them anymore.
There's no one still breeding those around. They just vanished.
Well, there's about 5 or 6 different species, 7 different ones, and the only ones that you see now are the giant frog-eyed geckos in very, very limited numbers. The Teratoscincus kaiserlingi. The other ones, probably the most coveted one, or 2 of them, I should say, was Teratoscincus bedriagi, and then probably the best one, in my opinion, was a Microlepis. And they're the dwarf frog-eyed geckos. And we did, a couple of us, we did really good breeding those for X amount of years. But, as like with a lot of things, it's hard to keep certain species, especially like that's very selective in their habitat and diet and everything, going for multi-generations. It's not a leopard gecko, it's not a crested gecko or a ball python, where you have minimal work. There's way more into keeping like a smaller gecko like that going. So it's eventually they faded out, they all died out, and unfortunately that's the path of a lot of different species that we've had over the years.
And they're niche projects too, right? So like I'm sure but people, if the more people know about them, the more it'll kind of spread out, whereas it's a little bit more on a niche side where it doesn't really establish, for a long period of time, I'm sure.
Right. And back then, you didn't have the amount of people that's in the reptile hobby. I mean, you just didn't. So,
back in the early 2000s, I used to go in where I'm at. It's a pet paradise, and that's my dad. When I was a young kid, it was every other weekend they would get a new price list of animals, and that was like when I was most excited to go. And it was very very limited, and you're selling to people in the local area. Like you said, there's not really social media where it's kind of there's a bigger spectrum of supply and demand. So. It's definitely was for sure different back then.
Yeah, it back in like the late 70s and early 80s, there was in the Chicagoland area, like in Schaumburg, and they had a few other smaller stores, but their main store, it was this giant pet shop. It was called Noah's Ark, and they had they had their reptile section was better than going to a zoo. They always had like crazy stuff coming in, and a really cool thing was that all their cages, they were set up naturally. That left a pretty big.
That's awesome.
Like on me. But one of the things that I just will never forget, they had this was when you could still bring legally shingleback skinks in.
No.
Yeah, and I remember seeing baby shinglebacks for $275. So I mean they're really about that big, and I just I never saw. I could tell you this, that I never saw any like Australian Tiliquas, like let's say northerns or easterns, at that shop and all. It was either like your Indonesian Tiliqua, especially Gigas. That was pretty popular back then. But and then once in a while, they would get in a couple baby shinglebacks. So
That's awesome. There's no
yeah.
better sight than seeing baby shinglebacks, I'm sure.
Oh, I know. I know. It was like, God, if I had $275 back then.
And they'd probably still be kicking right now because they can live long. So, oh man, that's awesome. So in when I think you were saying that you got back in 2000, was that when you started working with like occipitalis, or because I remember you were one of the first in the States to breed occipitalis, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah.
So,
Our very first successful reproduction of that species was in 2008, and prior to that, they were in like one or two zoos, and they couldn't get them to breed, and they were in a few private hands, and the only guy that really made a concerted effort that really tried to get these things going was Joe Lewis of Rare Earth.
okay. Yeah,
He had a lot of different stuff back then, but he was all about money, and that can't be your focus, for breeding. I mean, it just,
100%.
so, but yeah, like around 2000, that I was at the Breeders Expo, and that was like, I think, our fourth year down there or something, and as a vendor, and there was a guy there from Sweden, and he had like juvenile Niger Latias, and
Wow.
yeah, I want to say that he had like 6 of them. It was it was like a litter, or well, I shouldn't say like a litter, but animals from different litters and all that. But he had like a little group, and nobody, the way that he had them set up, nobody really was paying attention to him because he didn't have no lights on him. He just basically on the back end of his table and like round deli cups. And so come Friday, I looked at those things, and I just right then and there, that's it. I made a deal with them, and I bought 4 of them. So yeah, that right there just kind of was the catalyst for Niger Latia, because I finally prior to that, at the very first Breeders Expo, Ron Tremper had a young pair of Niger Latias. That was like, besides the Brookfield Zoo seeing them, that was only the second time I ever saw him in life. And he had 2 of them. And I remember Ron was set up like in one of the corners, and he already had, before the show even opened, he already had a reserve sign on them. So, it just showed you how special they were. But then it was like I think it was in 96, 97, something like that. We went back down to the Breeders Expo. We weren't vending. We just, went down there. And, again, this is when the expo was still in Orlando. And the main room had, they had one big main room. Then they had these little satellite rooms. And the main room, there was, I remember Joe Lewis set up in the, way up in the corner with Rare Earth. He was doing a lot of monitors and different pythons, but he had 4 or 5 Tiliqua multifasciatus.
Nice.
Yeah, that was the very first time I saw them. And
that's awesome.
There was a vendor that had, he had a Gurnia Stokesies, a Lingy, and he had a group of them, and then he had a small group of Niger Latias, the Alpines, as well too. And those things were going like for $1,500 each.
Wow.
Well, I talked to Joe about the Maltese, and they weren't for sale. He just brought them just for display. I think just to show off.
Yeah.
I mean, they were pretty awesome, skinks. But excuse me. But like I said, it wasn't until like 2000 that I finally got them, and I've been working with them since. I've actually still have those bloodlines represented in my collection, and
Wow.
I still have one of those original animals. It's a male, and he's 25 years old now. So I mean, he's getting up there in age. He's got a little bit of cataracts in one eye, but he's still healthy. He still hisses at me, and
That's funny.
When you pick
I
them
have
up.
a male just like that. He's an
Yeah,
older boy. He's an older boy too. I call him my little punk. He's like a little punk. He gets all twitchy and hisses at you, but he doesn't bite. He needs to show his little punkness, you know.
yeah. No, this one will bite, and I have been bit, and it's
Oh.
not cool. But he's fathered a couple litters over the years.
Oh, that's awesome, man.
He's been
Yeah.
a real good animal, and he'll stay here till he dies.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, but yeah, since then, this is my solid 24th year working with the Alpines, and and like I tell everybody, when you're working with something, a project that long, you learn something every year about them. If somebody says, "Oh, well, I've worked with an animal for a couple of years, I know everything," no, it's it doesn't work that way.
And there's one thing that I'm really learning myself, and I would tell anybody, and I'm sure you would attest, Alex and Phil, is especially with Tiliqua, is I believe that like working, not like don't go into the project thinking that if it doesn't work in a couple of years that it's going to be done. Like what I've noticed is some animals, it takes them time to adjust, years, and to not give up, especially on animals that are live birthing. I believe that to stick with it and condition them. Maybe they are a little overweight. Maybe you can try to trim them down a little bit. But that's one thing that I'm learning with them is having them to condition and don't give up on that project because they will reward you. And I'm learning that. It's funny. I have a girl that I'm really hoping for, and it's gonna be more sentimental. Is I bought from Ty Parks, I think I want to say 5-6 years ago when he was, selling a lot of his animals. And I've had her for that long. She's never had a litter for me. But this year, I'm really feeling good about it. And it took that long sticking with it and trying to, commit to it and not give up. And I just think that, especially with a lot of Tiliqua, I think it's important to kind of stick to it,
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head that with a lot of organisms, they're creatures of habit. They don't like change, especially in their environments. Whether captive or non-captive, and Tiliquas are no exception. That was the problem with back in the early days, was that when some of these rare Tiliquas would come up or come into the country, that after like 2 or 3 years, that individual that had, let's say, either a pair of, let's just say, Tiliqua hospitalis, they when they had no breedings, and they obviously didn't have patience and didn't understand the animals, didn't want to understand it, because they were looking more at the dollar signs, and those animals kept getting passed around from collection to collection. And that is not good for a live bearing animal, or especially a Tiliqua, or even a Gurnia for that matter. And that's why there was either none or very, very, very few successful breedings and reproductions of those lizards back then. It just because of impatience. That's what it boiled down to. But now there's like you two gentlemen, you got good collections, you're sticking with it, and what's happening? You're seeing like some awesome, success, kudos. And, and there's a couple other people out there in the U.S. that are doing the same thing. And it's you have to stick with it. If this is something that you really are interested in, that you really want to get into, commit to it, and commit 159% to it. Because you may see results the first year, but chances are it'll be like the third or fourth year, and after that, just stick with it. Don't just let it be a fly by night project.
And that's one thing I'm learning as a keeper is it's the keeper too. We're always talking about how to care and husbandry and take care of the animal, but it's ourselves. I think that there's a mindset mentality that is so important, not to let the outside noise come in, being able to, look at yourself in the mirror and say that, I'm willing to do this, and have that mindset of zero expectations. Because I always tell everybody this is like having the, zero expectations, and everything after that's going to be a gift. So if you can have that mindset to say, hey, I don't want nothing out of this. I mean, obviously enjoying the project. And I want to get into it to enjoy it. But to have that mindset, I think, is important than just, the husbandry side. Because there is two sides to this. It's not just the kept, it's the keeper itself. And I think that's very, very important to success. And like you said too, is the interest too. You want to have interest in the animal. You don't, it hasn't happened that much, but if there's a project I feel like, you know what, it's just not there and I'm not feeling it, I think that's where you want to deviate a little. But I think that's what's important too. You don't want to, not say laziness, but you don't want to, you want to be on. You want to be on, switched on all times. I think it's important.
Yeah, it's that commitment. Again,
Yep.
you just have to have it. Whether you got to get up, 20 minutes earlier in the day to feed stuff or water, or and jump in there and clean, Tiliqua crap all over.
That's what just happened to me today. I got allergies, and I'm like, oh no, I have a podcast tonight, and I clean cages, and I get allergies pretty bad sometimes, and I'm like, oh no, I hope I somewhat make it, but I'm doing a little okay. I thought it was gonna be a lot worse. I would be sniffling and sneezing.
Yeah, and then the thing is, once you have success, now you got more, little individuals you got to take care of too. And sure, Alex will have his hands full for quite a while with a new litter and going. So
he's ahead of us. So he's in there right now. He's got a bunch of heads there. So
yeah, I started April 1st. I got my first litter of the year for the Northerns. Out of curiosity, have you ever had a male that's been like sterile?
I honestly cannot answer that because there's, as Johnny said, and like we talked about, it's nice having more males than females, because if one male doesn't work out, if the male might not be willing at that particular time, if that's the case and all that doesn't necessarily mean that he's not sterile. The one thing that I guess if right after they go through your spring shed, you'll start seeing sperm plugs in their cage. If you catch them in time, because depending on the substrate you're keeping them on, they can dry up. If you're not looking in the cage, if they lay it or if they drop it in the morning, by the afternoon it's going to be dried up. So it's kind of hard. But if you see sperm plugs and all that, well, that animal's obviously it's a fertile animal. But having a sterile animal, I don't know if I've ever had an animal like that. I mean, pretty much all the males that I've ever had, depending on whatever species it is, they I would say that it's all about timing, and that they probably were were all fertile.
I've had a few times, and Phil, I'm sure you might, and I'm sure Alex, you have. I think it is a little somewhat different with animals that go through a brumation cycle, like cooling cycle. Is I've noticed that males that are they are fertile, they breed well, and they are proven. But there's years where I've had that they don't fire up, like they don't go into their shed, and they wind up not committing and breeding, and that's why we were talking about in the beginning of the show how important it is to have a solid group of males, because you just, it's in that moment you have, a week or 2 weeks, and plan B and C got to be prepared. And that's why it's good to have more males. And it's funny, even this year, like actually a few years, and it's one of Dave Sutton's original Oxypitalis. I love him. And in a sense, I love him because he's so experienced. So I've even noticed he tells me more than some of the younger studs. So some of the young guys just shoot and try to breed, and it's not really a thought process, or it's just female breed. And what I love about this male, he gives me cues. So what I mean by he's so experienced, he's been around probably, I think he's probably over or close to 10 years old. I'll put occipital's females, and being that he's experienced, he doesn't go and shoot for the gill and try to breed. He does this thing where he'll walk and tongue flick, and then do this little like loop around and kind of almost feel her out. And it's like almost like he tells me in a sense that, you know, is she ready or is she not? And usually if he kind of pulls away, because Phil, you know that female occidentals throw bluffs.
Yeah.
They throw a bluff, and you know it's hard to tell for me what I'm seeing, because you know that bluff, she's not in her window, but my male that's experienced will tell me that. So if she's throwing a bluff and he doesn't smell maybe her hormones, I'm not perfectly scientific on this, but it's more of an understanding is he does this little loop around. He'll go towards her, tongue flick. Okay, I'm not. And that's what tells me, hey, she's not in her window. Give it a couple more days. And then what do you know? The barrier is broken. I'll bring her in, and boom, he doesn't do it anymore. And she's throwing her bluff. And Phil, you know that, you know, they'll the experienced male will grab and even pick up almost literally. And I think even that is important to understand, not just having, you know, a bunch of males that sometimes, you know, experienced males will give you good cues. And I know, Phil, you do it differently, which, you know, I applaud, which I think, you know, obviously it's always good to have different levels and things of, you know, different breeders do different things. But, you know, I do the introducing concept. I think you keep them together, right, Phil? Or
Yeah, you know, as you know, that you got to watch them real carefully first, because they can go south pretty quick, and you don't need, you know, a female or even a male walking around with 3 legs, or you know, a male getting bit. You know, if he's you know, inverted as hemipenes, you don't want that female, you know, nailing them, because I have heard of that before from some breeders. Not too often, but you know, it obviously can happen. But yeah, I just you know, I'll keep mine together, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It just, you know, there's a lot of different factors that I feel when it comes to breeding them. You know, especially like the, you know, well, let's just concentrate like on Niger Latias and that there's a lot of factors that contribute, you know, to their successful breeding, and you know, good hibernation. Prior to that, you know, there's certain steps that I always take, and there's always like a shutdown period. For me, that always starts basically in the end of August. I know it sounds early, but by November 1st, that's it. You know, it's where I live. I can cool my animals early, and they're done. They're done eating basically about the end of September. They don't even want food. They'll drink here and there. They'll hardly ever come out. You know, the photo period's already being reduced down to basically like 8 hours a day. Temperatures are already dropping. You know, like at the, you know, like where I live at the end of August, we can have nights that are 40 degrees. And I'm sure you experience that too, Alex, you know, like up by you. And, you know, the animals, they just kind of, it's like a cue. They just know. But, you know, they have to have a good, solid hibernation. They, you know, it should be quiet. They don't need to be waking up or checked on, maybe just visually, just to see if anything's walking around. Because if it is, you got to pull that animal right out of hibernation, because if you try to put it back down, you'll kill it. Because something somewhere along the line has disturbed that animal, and that animal will not go back down again. And you know, it's just something that happens. But you know, coming out of their cooling period, it has to be gradual as well too. And you know, with lighting, heating, offering food, the right types of food, water, humidity. There's just so many different, you know, factors. And then when it comes time to actually breeding, you still don't know if your female is going to be receptive or not that year. There's so many things that just mount against breeding as opposed to having success. That's why when you do have success, it's
Oh,
a big deal. I mean,
yep.
it really is. And even the guys in Australia, they're high fiving each other when they get litters and stuff like that. And some of them they're in their natural habitat. They're or the areas that they live. Um, they have it. I don't want to say they have it down to a science and all that, but they got pretty close. But we're not in Australia. We're in North America, and
Yeah.
over in Europe as well too. It's if it was that easy, there would be these lizards would be all over the place, and and you'll never have that. So that's why there's just so many different factors that are going against. The odds are against you. From from day one. But that's challenge. So.
That's the
Uh,
fun part.
it's a challenge, and that's why you stick it out and you have that patience and you just try and keep plugging away and hoping for the best. But
Yep.
just with those animals, um, after you introduce them, you really have to watch them. uh, Sometimes you see lockups right away and sometimes you don't. Some females they're just not receptive at all, but it takes a little schmoozing with the males, and eventually, or maybe not, that they'll cohabit with each other, but they won't breed at all. And
Yeah.
it's all about timing and all about these other factors coming into play at one time. And if it doesn't work out right, you're going to have basically that animal sit there for another year. um, Probably the biggest thing, again, I can't overemphasize their cooling period. Um, and either with Hospitalis or the Alpines or the lowlands, they have to have a solid, undisturbed cooling period. And if they go through that, your chances of breeding them are going to be way, way higher as opposed to having a mediocre, cooling period. And your temperatures, you really got to watch that. Like for me, I would say that magic number is like 50, 50, 51 degrees. If I can keep that solid for a couple months and all that, I've got better chances of breeding. But if the temperature goes, like 55 or above, those animals will start to become active, and
Yep.
you don't want that at all. You don't need an animal coming out. They need to be, they need to stay down. But the lowest that I think I've ever gotten them was like around, or that they've ever gone down is like about 37, and I don't really like those
Yeah.
temperatures. Not
I
interested in
know that feeling.
Yeah, I'm not interested in popsicles, but
No.
if it occasionally drops down to like 45, I'm not worried about that. But if it jumps up to like, like 49, 50, I'm pretty comfortable with that. And I got thermometers all over the place when I'm, cooling them, and I check them in the morning, afternoon, and right before I go to bed too, just to make sure that things are stable. But I think that, in my opinion, is probably the largest factor, in breeding these guys.
I agree. I definitely I even try to. There's always in winter. I always try maybe 2 or 3 weeks. In those weeks, I always try to get them into the 40s, and it's just a gradual, a dip. Like I
Mhm.
just try to get them. We get them into high 50s, and I just slowly, gradually try to come down, sprinkle in a couple 40s, and then go back up. But I think, I always like I feel, and I hope maybe Phil you'll see is like compared to some of the other species, with Nigrolatia, I feel like it's almost like a hibernation, not really a brumation.
Yeah, no,
It's
no,
like there's a moment where it's a total shutdown. Like it's like they're gone. They're in a deep sleep.
yeah, no, I agree with you. They really need that, and I've seen
Yeah.
that. Like with the lowlands too, the exact same thing. The hospitalis and that. Um, they I mean, mine have always just once that temperature drops, that's it. They're done as well too. Yeah, they really. when the temperature drops like about, even like around 60 or, maybe about 57 or something like that, they're done. They're not, because they're, a warm, loving lizard. They like
Yeah.
their, they love their heat. But when it gets down that low, they internally, they just know. And that time of year, especially with, decreased photo period, they know it's time to go to sleep, and
Yeah.
they're just done.
Yeah, and I want to emphasize on this because I think it's pretty important. I'm noticing this myself is we're not, because I know it's always different from being outside, and being that they're in captivity, we're not mimicking the ambient temperatures on the outside. We're mimicking what they're doing underground. So I think that's what some people might not see is, and something I noticed, but it's not perfect, and it's not realistic in a sense, because we can't make, in the wild, they're a couple days switch, it's going back up. But what happens is it's that ground temp that kind of pulls a little bit, and these guys will pop out, maybe bask a couple days, get some water. Where it's not saying it's impossible, but it's very, we're acting as if in captivity that they're underground, right? They're burrowed down, and I think that's where the shutdown period really is than what it would be on the outside. Now, it never really can be mimicked like the outside in a sense. So that's one thing that I'm learning myself. And how I wake my females up, and try to wake my males up first is, back then, when I first started, they were all in the same room. So I was mimicking that the females are kind of still burrowed down. So I'd put a tarp over while I'm waking my males. So I think that's important for maybe some people listening, is like we're almost acting as if they're in a burrow mode in that style of brumation than more of an ambient temp. Because it's, being indoors, it's so hard to try to act as if they're in the wild and just, warm up the building fast and then, try to pull them back down. And, sometimes we're trying to find those happy mediums, but it's not in the perfect world. And I'm sure, Phil, you might see that too. Or, you've done it a lot longer than I have, but maybe something that you see too.
Yeah, you know, you've got your macro climate, and you got and your microclimate, and to really understand these guys, you got to do your research. Where they come from, and I mean, there's really not a lot of literature that's out there, or even like a ton of personal observations in the wild that really talk about the microclimate of these skinks and of Tiliquas, and their macroclimate, it's extreme. It's
Yeah.
it's cold, it's hot, blazing hot. There's a rainy season, there's dry season, all that. So what are these animals doing?
Yeah.
And there's um, I found an article, like, geez, I think it was published like over 20 years ago. Um, and it was, from Australia. It specifically talked like about shinglebacks, but it can be applied to, your other Tiliquas. And they, uh, they, and Johnny, you and I have talked about this. They go in the hotter months and all that. They go through like a true estivation.
Yeah. That was
And
one of my questions for you.
yeah, and so after the party's over, the breeding season, the animals are just basically sitting there. They're recuperating. The males, they need
Absolutely.
to gain weight because they're out chasing females, looking for them, and the females are obviously gravid. Um, a female's habits are going to be a little bit different than the males, but they basically, during the hotter months and all that, they go through an estivation. They hide. They may come out, for a little bit to bask, but then they're trying to avoid that heat. And if you think about, a female, a male, he probably doesn't have to come out as often, but
Yeah.
a female, um, let's just say she's got a litter of six babies in her. She's carrying 6 or 7. That's 6 or 7 little ovens that are generating heat themselves, within the confines of of this other body, this female. So, that's the female's got to be very careful about, basking. And, So yeah, you have to understand, the broader picture of these animals and all at certain times of the year, and even like when it comes to hibernating them as well. What now? Yeah,
Yeah. So no, I go ahead, sorry.
well, just when it comes to hibernating, do you offer water to them or do you not? If they're in a true deep sleep and all that, what kind of humidity are you giving them? Are you providing any lights or no lights? There's what kind of airflow are you giving them? There's just a lot of different, little tiny factors that you just kind of have to, figure out, because what works for me may not work for Alex, or it may not work for you or another person because of like where I live. And that's why, you have to understand your animals. You got to understand, where you live, and understand, again, the natural habitat of these animals as well too, and try and, piece it all together.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to learn myself, is understanding how, because in a sense they are their own incubator, but we are also in control.
Mhm.
So if you're getting them too hot, it can be very dangerous, and that's something I'm learning with occipitalis is, you know, understanding because they can kind of, in a sense, like you were saying, they can generate, in a sense, their own heat for periods of time. Obviously, they need basking, but there's moments where they can step away. Because I don't know if you guys ever noticed that, and I've told that we were talking about this with Alex. I was talking about this with Alex this morning. Is like one big sign I notice on gravid females that kind of give me a sign to say, hey, like I'm pretty sure that she's holding, is they're always warm to the touch. Like even when they're away from basking, I'll notice that when I grab them, gravid females, there's a warm touch to them. They're always keeping a pretty stagnant. I'm stagnant. I'm sorry, pretty consistent warm temperature. And but at the same time, they can veer off from basking for a long period. I'll watch them; they'll be gone away from basking for a long period of time, but still warm. And it makes me wonder what goes on in the wild. Like it tells me that I feel that females um, only come out and maybe bask for a little bit and pull away, and they're able to hide and kind of regulate their own temperatures. Whereas it's when we're doing this indoors, and I'm learning this is it good to give them heat or have a temperature too high and not be able to regulate away? And like for instance, occipitalis, like I noticed that I have years where they're good, but then there's years where it's the babies are coming out weak, and I'm really starting to think that I'm keeping the cage temps a little too warm, and maybe gestation is being sped up a little bit, and maybe I want to give them an area where they can be able to cool a little bit more. And again, that's why I always like use the method, like give them everything they want and need, and kind of step away. Don't I think I need to kind of be able to cool those temperatures down, maybe shut in their lights midday. And Phil, I would love to hear your insight on this. I think it's it'd be good for me to learn too.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I've experienced and learned like over the years, just keeping different lizards and geckos and even skinks and all that, and especially gravid Tiliquas, it's always better to go on the cooler side than on the warmer side, because again you'll cook your animals. That's why you got to watch your ambient temperature, and watch they obviously need to warm up during the day, and you. Uh, you need to keep a really good eye on what type of you know heat source that you're providing those animals. I don't really believe in underbelly heat. I always believe in over like dorsal heat, because in the wild they actually experience both. But if you have overhead heat, the substrate, or if you have like a let's say a piece of tile or rock or
That's
whatever it is, it's going to heat up. It's going to retain that heat. And even at night when the lights are shut off, Taliquas they're sometimes they're nocturnal, and they'll come out, they'll walk around, and a female will she that area that's heated up, she'll come out and she'll lay on that spot. And so, but you have to provide, like with all reptiles, you got to provide thermal gradients, and just
Yep.
keep them hot all the time. That's never good. And, along with that, you got to provide pretty good hides for them that are going to, be cooler and also have, like just a little,
Insulate.
yeah, a little measure of humidity as well too.
Yeah, I agree. Right, so like that's something I'm changing is so I do use underbelly heat, but I do it for certain periods of the day. So it was a good point that you brought up because that's how I look at it is, every time I watch these herpers in Australia, even in, the US, they go out at night and where do you know? They're walking the blacktop and, there's a reason why a lot of them are out there because they're trying to regulate their temperature still. So that's what I do at night is, so during the day, my underbelly heat's off
Mhm.
in the morning I have it set, and then what happens is once those lights kick off, the underbelly heat comes on for like a couple hours. So it's almost like I'm still trying to give them that uh possibility. So, but the thing is the underbelly heat's only 12 inches, so it's giving them everything they want and need. I'm not putting it across the whole cage. It's a little portion. And then there's a hide spot in different areas, a cool zone, and then there's another spot for her to hide and have that option. I have it on a thermostat. I have it at about 88 degrees. So
Mhm.
I've done that. Um, I'm just really thinking I'm getting my ambience and my occipitalis a little too warm.
Yeah.
So
Well, maybe this is a year to, just kind of play around with it and
and
just,
that's the year. Yep,
yeah,
I'm
just,
doing it now.
yeah, just kind of back off a little bit. But yeah, I mean, years and years ago, I had, like heat tape under a couple of cages and that, and I don't know, I just, I wasn't having any success, and I just kind of felt, these animals are too warm, so I,
Yeah.
stopped. And I'm not saying that was, the exact factor of success and all that, but it's just you, it's just always better to go on the cooler side than on the warmer side.
Yeah. And I think it's like you said, it's that's my mindset is to not be complacent, to understand and say, hey, like I need to make changes. I can't keep doing the same thing because I'm gonna get the same results, right? So I've had very healthy litters with Western, so um I don't know what could be the cause, but I really do believe that. I don't think it's genetic. Why? Because once I um, kind of put them in my care and get them back to life, they're I have babies that were a little weak from this past year that are monsters now and fully healthy, are perfectly perfect. So it's my mindset is to say either a something's happening in gestation. Obviously, we never know. It could always be diet, but I mean, I don't think that could be it because my Niger Latia are beautiful. They're
Mhm.
born big and robust. So it's just all something a learning curve.
Yeah, um, that's like something else is that don't write an animal off if it's
Yeah,
has like maybe some type of, if a baby is born has some type of deformity. Just as a small example, there was and this can happen like in anybody's collection. Um, I mean, I want to say it was, geez, probably 9 years ago, something like that. I had one litter born of Niger Latias and Alpines, and one of the babies, the left eye, it was basically like pushed in, so it could not see out of that eye, and it had a little bit of deformed labials, and the head was just shaped a little bit odd, on that size, and I kind of debated. The rest of the animal was perfect, and it had really nice pattern on it too. And the other, it was a litter of three babies, and the other two were perfect. So I just kind of thought, well, maybe the female bumped into something during gestation, or
yeah,
I don't really have a solid answer why it turned out that way. So I decided not to keep the animal. I wasn't going to put it down or anything. So I called a good friend of mine over in Germany. I got in contact with him. And this is when we could ship.
it's
Was
done
um,
now.
yeah, gone now. But I sent it to him, and I just gave it to him, and he wanted to pay me for it. I'm like, no, you're not. We're friends. I'm just going to give it to you. and he raised it up. Sure enough, it turned out to be a female. And so it was probably, I don't know, a couple years later, he bred it. And to this day, he still has that animal, and she's produced like, I think, 3 litters, healthy litters, perfect.
Wow.
Yeah, and out of those, I got 2 males back from them. So
That's
yeah,
gold.
yeah.
No,
So
so I think and I've learned this from Dave Sutton, and I'm visually seeing what it does, and I'm learning, because I'm not no like science expert. I'm not like, I don't know what's behind it, but I when I see, and the good thing that I have is observing and seeing things. And Dave, said to me, hey, if you have a baby that maybe is a little weak, try to get it some outside time.
yeah,
And what I'm watching, and I think any reptile person, they could take an animal from the inside and then go bring them the outside. It's like the Michael Jackson Thriller. It's just like they just come to life. And I've been seeing that, and I've saved multiple, and maybe anybody else out there that has weak babies, they can use this. And that's why I'm saying I think it could possibly help is, when I brought them outside, like they were on their deathbed on the inside. They were just no, they didn't move. They couldn't even walk. And then I think there's something central nervous system, neurological, that brings them to life when they're outside more than people think, mental wise. Like, I think that there's something there that's very interesting. And so I use that method, and I saved animals from that. And I'm not saying, let them outside all day, because it's not a good, they need to have a cool zone. But I think it's just getting them out in that sun. It's almost like a light switch, like almost like their body just they just wake up out of it, and kind of like the survival mode kicks in. And I've been learning that, and it's been very helpful. And I see, guys like, well, ladies too, Heather and Ron in Florida, putting their animals outside. And I think that's what's so cool about the hobby, is like being able to, not be complacent. Don't be afraid to try different things. And that's something I've learned, to just get some of those babies outside if they're a little weak. Give them a little piece, and they start to come to life. It's very interesting. It's funny. I'll be outside, and they're like looking, tongue flicks, and they're like alive. And then I walk them in, and it's almost like the computer shuts down. It's crazy.
yeah. You're basically giving them a dose of gamma radiation.
So
You know,
true.
it's. I mean,
Yeah.
I've experienced that too. But you got to watch out. You got to. I will say this: I've done that myself, and um, even like with my adult Tiliquas, uh, you you got to watch what kind of cage that you stick them in when you put them
True.
outside, because there was one year, and I mean, I'll admit this, I almost killed mine because
Re-
I stuck them in these like 96-gallon totes, like 2 animals per tote, and I left them out there, and they actually overheated. That tote
Yeah.
basically was like a giant, plastic coffin for them, despite an open top. And I just said I'll never do that again. So yeah, at least leaving them alone. So, if you're going to do it, usually like about a half hour, an hour is pretty much all you need. Well, I don't want to say all you need to do, but if that's all you have during your day, definitely get them out there.
No, and I like that you say that, because and I'm happy that you said that. It's appreciative, because people see this, and it's good that you say that, because that's kind of what I did, because they do get really hot, and especially
Yep.
animals that are weak. You leave them out there touch too long, it's done. So it was like almost, what I did was, this is how I did it. It was almost like little micro moments. So what I would do is I would get them some food, through a dropper. And my thought process is, it's their computer system. They need the fuel inside, and need the, like, to be digested, and then the fuel outside by the sun. So it's almost like it was a reactant. So I think that's what I played. So I did little micro moments. I agree. I'm happy you said that, because I would probably keep them out there 15 minutes. And it goes back to what we were saying, that like females too, like going through gestation, they go out, but they're able to regulate their temperature for a little bit longer. So, when you bring them back inside from those micro moments, they're still pretty warm. So they don't, like you said, they don't need a lot of time. So,
Right. And then too, you you have to look at the morphology of your animals too. The color and patterns that they have. Let's just say the Alpine Blotches and all that. What color are they? They're a dark
yep.
mauve, and they're going to absorb that heat way faster than let's say let's say maybe like a northern. You look at multifasciata, their pattern. They're going to absorb heat pretty quick. Hospitalis and all that, they've got their dark bands. It's their. What's kind of interesting is that when they're babies and all that, they need that heat in order to grow, so their bands are more thicker. And then as they get older, they don't need to eat as much, so their bands get actually smaller.
No, that's
So
very interesting.
yeah, so it's just kind of just thinking outside the box a little bit, and applying certain things that you notice to your animals.
No, and I agree. Like, Niger Latia, it's like, I look at them and I go, it tells you everything you need to know, because in the wild where they're from, it's so harsh. When that sun that maybe pops out, being that the ambient is probably still very cool, that sun, it's just that little bit of sun, it just heats them up fast. And it's very interesting to say that each pattern kind of plays their own, and it gives
Yeah,
you a location, like, the dark Aspera, like, there's a reason, why they're darker, because they're more southern in Australia. It's cooler, so they need to thermal regulate a little faster, than some of the other, Western forms. And so it's so cool. This is what I love about this stuff, and I think it's fun that we're talking about it.
so it's all about learning.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, when they're gravid, do you think the babies are actually like producing heat for the female, or since they got more mass, they can like maintain it longer?
Well, like all reptiles are thermal, they thermal regulate, and I think those, as those embryos are growing, uh, their hearts are going, their blood's going. Uh, Obviously they're not moving around, inside the mother and all that, but the mother's, still moving around. She needs to, process, you know, food intake, water intake, heat, light and everything. But those babies, yeah, they're internally functioning, and they are producing heat. So that's why I have always just felt, it's better to, you still always have to watch. You got to watch, your ambient temps, but just providing a really good, cooling spot, or most of the cage should be on the cooler side as opposed to the warmer side, because you don't really want, babies that are going full term and dying, because of overheating. And I've heard of that before. I've never had it happen, but it's not a pretty sight. And
It's not
yeah,
firsthand. I've seen it. So
yeah, I do believe that those babies, once they reach a certain size or a certain point in development, they are generating their own heat.
and you can even, like, that's another thing try to understand is, it's all season. So, the closer to summertime, the more probably pulled back they start to do. Like, they start to kind of hunker down somewhere, regulate down low. They're not sitting out in that those ambients in the summertime are very high. So that's another thing I'm learning. I wouldn't doubt occipitalis, being that they're from, a really hot area, desert. So, I mean, obviously some of the, more northern forms, I think, during that summertime, they're bunkering down somewhere, and hanging for probably, who knows, maybe a few weeks, regulating, maybe popping their head out just a little bit, thermoregulate, and pop back down. And and Phil, maybe you see is like they occipitalis, they'll find, a little spot where they're going to lay or have babies. And another thing I found out, and I'm sure you have, and I talked about this with Don Patterson. I've noticed, over time is like they'll have a couple babies, and then maybe a couple days later, sometimes I've had even to a week, they'll maybe pop out one or two more. I wonder if that's like some type of, tactic for predators, or just in case, say, hey, have a couple and then kind of move on. It's interesting.
Yeah, well, there's I know that fish are like that, and there are some reptiles. It's gradual dispersion, and they will hold their litters or their eggs, and lay them over a period of a couple days or even like a week or something like that. But yeah, I've heard of that, like with Tiliquas. I've never experienced that. The only thing that I could say is that I've had if animals or females are gravid, they once they start birthing, um, usually like within I'd say maybe like 5, 6, 7 hours and all that, they're done with the litter. But then maybe a day or two, or even 3 days later, they'll uh, uh, they'll uh, they'll actually deposit like an infertile ovum, or maybe one or two of them. But there a lot of times, if a female will do that, she's already had her litter. She'll turn around and eat that ovum. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So you only see like maybe a little piece of it. You look in the cage. It's like, well, what's that? And then you pick it up. It's like, yeah, okay, it's an infertile ova.
Or a
So
little stain. You see the little
yeah,
stain
or
spot.
little
You ever see
stain.
that one?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Why do you think some spread them out that much? I've had a female northern like do one a day for like 14 days.
Wow.
Wow, that's long. It could be different contributing factors. It could be temperature, light, heat. It just could be her.
Stress.
Yeah, something might be stressing her out. It could be a noise or an odor, something, and she's just wanting to retain those babies because instincts kick in, and she's trying to protect her brood basically. And so, but yeah, there could be a lot of different factors that contributed to that.
So Phil, I got a question that I found so intriguing when we talked on the phone, and I would love for people to hear it. So you touched base on it just before. So like I want to hear. I'm sure people want to hear, and I want to hear too because I love it. It's interesting. Is the process of your estivation, because I find it very interesting, and I've noticed like you've talked about it before, is males, they have a job, and then after that job's done, they build their fat storage, and I'm noticing it literally right now because we're entering the summer months. They literally will come out in the morning for a little bit, and then they're gone.
Yeah,
And then when you go to lift, I have cork bark. You lift it up and you put your hand on there. They're cold. They're
yeah.
like they're like, I've had enough. I did my part. I'm done now. So I want to hear your process, and I think I found it so interesting, especially being in captivity. It's different than outside. So
Yeah. So I mean, as I've said, is that after the party's over, the males, they're, and after the females have, the males are done with their breeding, females are done with their with their litters, or even if they haven't, produced anything that year. Um, Usually, like about, I'd say maybe about 2 months later, they really start going into a non-active period, and it just starts getting more and more. It starts building up to a point where you just don't see the animals at all,
yep.
and this is not a forced uh, habit. This is something that's natural, and I mean, years ago, I didn't quite understand it. And it's about us knowing our animals and that observation. It's and after doing some research, that hey, these animals are not active 24/7, 365 days a year,
Nope.
and there's a lot of desert species or a lot of reptiles that during the hotter months of the year, wherever they come from, they go into an estivation or dormant period because your outside conditions they're extreme. I mean, extreme heat, and there's probably very little water. There might not be as much food that's available, at that, because all their prey items are, trying to get out of the heat as well. So what I usually do, like around, at least for me, it's about maybe July, is that the photo period will stay the same, but the heat gets actually turned completely off, and the ambient temperature and all that will stay, probably like around in the upper 70s, maybe around 80 to 82 or 83, depending on the day. And at night, it will drop into like the upper 60s, maybe lower 70s. And those animals, they just basically go to sleep, and it's not like they're unhealthy or something's wrong or anything. It's just part of their cycle. And so, I'll keep them that way, and for probably like about 4, maybe 5 weeks, and then I just, by August or something like that, I'll kick the heat back on, and now it's time to actually, you could say, reactivate them if they want to, and which they usually do. Um, and they'll start coming out a little bit more, and they're feeding up for the fall, and they're feeding up prior to their hibernation. And that's when you really, I mean, you should always be paying attention to their diet, but you really got to, pay attention to their protein intake, and also their, good supplements and that. So, it's very important. But yeah, I just feel it's part of their natural habit. And
Well, and I think what I've from talking to you, it's like I think that's why it's always good learning and taking it in is, I've learned that it doesn't just do on the short term effect. I think there's a long term effect to this, like almost to a sense that it will help them in the long run because it's almost like a natural preserver because I feel, when you have their computer systems, and when you have this computer system running, 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 the pistons are just going, going, going all day. You're burning these guys out. I think that's why a lot of the metabolic bone disease occurs because they're so in overdrive that they're starting to take up everything, and then they start taking it from they start to deplete so much, they're now starting to take it from their bones, calcium and stuff like that. So I think in the long run, putting this in perspective, just even hearing it from you, it makes sense to say, hey, like you're not only helping them in the short term, you're giving years to their life by giving them that natural preserver, And I remember you brought it up is like for anybody out there, it's like you're looking outside midsummer, and you said this, Phil. I look outside, it's like there's no birds, there's nothing around. It's so hot that they gotta preserve themselves and not overheat. And I think it's a longevity thing than a short term thing. You got to look in your head. You're helping this animal give years onto its life. I would say. I would hope you feel the same way, Phil and Alex. So I think that's where you put things in perspective. It's just one of those things like you put it in my head, and then it's like, oh, like that makes sense. And then it's like the other things that can occur.
yeah, you don't, you don't want to burn your animals out. Everything has a rest period. Even we have a rest period. Even after long days of work, we want to come home and just take like a 15-minute power nap or something.
Yeah.
And then we have to rest at night, in order for us to keep going. Same thing with lizards. They all have their rest periods. And for some, it includes like a hibernation, and it actually includes like an estivation as well, too. And it's all contributes, to like longevity, because the animals are not, processing or, 24/7. They have to have their shutdown periods. So yeah, it's but here, this is an observation too, is that, just like with hibernation, if you see an animal that is just not willing to hibernate, or if they start and a couple weeks later they come out and they will not go back down, you have to bring that animal out. Same thing with estivation. If an animal goes down and then like within a week or 2 or 3 and all that, it becomes active again, bring it out. Don't try and force it. It's because it's just it's a detriment to the animal. Yeah, and you could lose it too.
So
Yeah,
do you think
that's. Go
fall?
ahead, Alex.
Oh, I was gonna say, do all Tiliqua species you think estivate?
In my opinion, yeah, I really do. Given the harsh environments that they live in and the wide range of temperature fluctuations and whatnot, Australia is an unforgiving place, and there's certain there's certain times that are that offer more opportunities for them to seek each other out, breed, birth birth their litters, to eat, water, all that stuff. And then there's just times there, where it's not. And it's that during those times that, let's find a log, let's find a burrow, let's find a tussock grass or something like that, crawl under or something like that. And just get out of the elements and just, basically curl up and just wait for the more opportune time.
Yep, and the animals. That's how I've learned too. Hearing it from you, but then also in house is like I watch the rhythm of what they're doing. Like right
Mhm.
now, we're entering into those summer months. The males, I don't see them. They're gone.
Yeah.
Some of them don't even eat their food. They don't eat at all. There's no point. Not saying there's no point, but they don't go to their food and they're pretty much shut down. And those are cues.
Yeah.
That kind of give you an idea. It's
Yeah.
interesting.
And one thing that we talked about too, John, was that it's good on the pocketbook too. Our electric bill goes down. So I mean, it does, because you're not generating as much heat as well too. So alleviates that electric bill. For like a month and a half in the summertime.
Absolutely. I agree fully. It's interesting. So
What one thing when I was talking to TC mentioned, he'll do one day during the week with no light to like, I guess like a shady day. Have you ever done anything like that or no?
I've never uh, applied anything like that during the week, but um, I mean, weather is not stable, and we you have thunderstorms coming in tomorrow, so it's going to be dark pretty much all day. Humidity's up, barometric pressure is going to be changing, and the animals feel that, they experience that. So it's not going to be as bright. So tomorrow, I can tell you this: I'm not expecting them to be super active. The animals, like what you're experiencing now, John, like with the males, I'm not seeing any of mine either right now.
yeah.
I mean, they're
Yep.
just they're gone. They're in their hides, and they probably come out when I'm at work for an hour or two, to get a drink out of their water bowls or maybe warm up a little bit, and then that's it. They're done. But the females, um, almost all of them, and the ones that I highly suspect are gravid, they're out, and they're I can tell that they've been moving around in their cages, or even when I come home from work, even my wife, she'll see them that they're out basking, or they're out thermal regulating.
Exactly. That's what I see. I see a lot
Yeah,
of the girls that I feel good about is like
yeah,
there's these moments through the day. It's almost like a rotisserie chicken.
yeah,
They they'll they'll do the turn. They'll bake one side, roll around,
yeah.
bake the other side,
No,
but they'll even
that's
they'll
a good way to
even
put it.
yeah. So they'll even I've noticed they'll even veer away for maybe an hour or so and kind of hunker down somewhere and then pop back out. So I look at it as like a rotisserie chicken. They're constantly trying to regulate, and those are all good signs. And I would talk to this to Alex, and I'm sure Phil, you feel the same way. It's like a checklist. You start to mark down. You see what's going on. It goes from how are they basking? To the touch. Are they warm all day? How's their food response? I've noticed that a girl that's gravid, she has some meaning to the way she wants to eat.
Yeah,
I noticed that tails start to kind of deplete, but their bodies are getting big. So there's those little checklists, and it all kind of you start to go, all right, that's interesting, and I think that that's the fun part, right, Phil and Alex?
oh
I
yeah.
feel like that's the part that intrigues us. Is that it's just watching what they're doing.
Yeah, yeah, that's like almost there's certain constants that we know we can rely on with the animals, and then the others that we just, it's all a guessing game.
Yeah.
And then there's the other behaviors or everything else that's associated with these animals that we're still learning.
Yeah, I agree. And they'll throw surprises at you. That's why it's always good to
Yeah,
have zero expectations. You never know what's going to happen.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So do you do a pretty diverse diet, Phil?
Yeah, I do all natural, and I don't do anything like really crazy artificial. I stay away from dog food. I have pretty much all from the beginning, and I think some individuals, they just get it in their mind. They had a mindset like years back that, well, Tiliqua will eat anything, and they're omnivores. One Australian guy told me years back they're four-legged garbage machines. They just walk around and eat everything,
It's true.
but they're not eating the same thing all the time. So variety is always a spice of life, and you just got to really switch it up. And different times of the year when different vegetables, fruits are available, throw it in.
Yeah.
The only thing that I stay away from are acidic fruits like oranges, kiwi. They will not get that at all because I think that's it's not good for your system, and even for people that's just like too much. So you don't need your animals eating something like that and then vomiting it up, later on because it's wrecking their guts or something like that. But I like different poultry, like cooked turkey, chicken. You want organ meat is big time. I really like that a lot. Like your liver, chicken hearts, gizzards, stuff like that. As far as like protein, pink rat pinks. I mean, if I let these crazy animals, have it, they'll eat, probably 10 rat pinks, per feeding if I wanted to. But there's, so high in fat and everything. So,
Yeah.
you gotta, you have to offer it to them, but you gotta really regulate. But, like different fruits and all that. June's around I mean, it's only May the 1st and all that, but when June comes, like around here, we have a strawberry farm right down the road, and fresh strawberries after I've washed them up, chopped them up. I kid you not, there's so many times that I've had a bowl of fresh strawberries that I'm taking down into the lizard room, and these animals, even my
Smell it.
guardians and Rhacodactylus, they'll come right out. They smell it, and they know that hey, we're getting something fresh, something interesting. So you always got to mix it up. It's like insects. Uh, a long time. Back in the '90s, we were real limited on what we could get. It was mainly crickets. And that's it. So like when it came to baby Tiliquas, um, if you get your hands on adult crickets, dust them and throw them in. They will go for them. They love chasing them, but it can't be a staple. And then superworms came on the scene, and superworms are okay, but boy, you gotta, some animals, they can digest that ectoskeleton real easy, and then others, they just regurgitate it. They pig out on them and
I've seen it.
barf it right out. So you got to watch out. But duvia roaches, um, they just especially pre-wing duvias, all mine will go for those. You put like a pile of them in a little dish, where the heads are crushed or something like that. They're still relatively alive. They'll come out and it's like a major treat for them. They love that a lot. But I do, the only artificial food that I really like is the bluey food by Rapashi. Um, and I'll always mix that up like with some type of fruit, like either bananas or raspberries or something like that. And they'll eat the whole entire thing. The only problem with Rapashi food that I just cannot stand, it's powder. You got, in order to make that gelatinous material, you got to add water. Well, once you do that, the animals eat it. Well, guess what? It's coming out as water almost. And it's like,
Yeah.
you guys have probably seen it or experienced it. And so now you have like this elongated diarrhea, train, and you have to clean that up. So
So I changed I stopped doing the mix in hot water, the like the gelatinous, like you
yeah,
said. So I don't do that anymore because I just feel like it's so there's no there's variance to it, but I like it combined with something. So I actually will put the powder in the food mix.
oh yeah,
So like when I'm cutting my vegetables and sometimes maybe I'll use a Missouri omnivore. I soak like the pellets and just use
yeah,
that's it's like a very small base, and then mix greens, and stuff like that, and then I'll mix. Yeah, and you'll love this because the Rhacodactylus. I'll take Pangea fruits and insects, put a scoop of that in. I'll put some grub pie. That's what I like to use, and then kind of just mix it all together. And I think they're getting the best of all worlds, I guess, in a sense. So
yeah. Something that they love too, and it's like candy to them, is Gerber baby foods.
the
And I mean, you can mix anything up with those baby foods, and they go nuts, especially like with like with turkey or banana or different fruits like mango or something like that. Just mix it all together and put some other supplements in them.
Yeah,
And
I do that with picky eaters. Picky eaters, get your plate of food and you put a little bit on the top. They'll like start to lick, and then all of a sudden
yep,
they try to grab, and then that kind of entices them. I like that.
yeah.
It's a good idea.
The one meat that you want to really stay away from, and there was one individual that told me years back, he was feeding his skinks little steak chunks, and there's like with fat mixed in it, and I did try it one time, and I noticed that on a couple of the animals the urates were actually compacted, they were harder, and you don't want that, so I backed off. I don't use it anymore. I backed off on it completely.
Wow.
So the only type of like real meats are going to be like turkey and chicken.
I wanted to bring this up, Phil, and I think, and Alex, you guys can both kind of maybe. I would love to hear your insight. I'm noticing that like I've had a lot of success during wake up because I believe that gestation is a mental game for them too. I don't think it's just, this is what you have to do for their body. I think there's a lot of they have to feel safe to want to go into a gestation. So like during wake up, I I don't overfeed. It's small portions more throughout the week. So like meaning like we'll have the diet 2 days, the normal teaspoonful of your mix, but then there's that like mentally brainly telling them saying daily I'll go in there and just give them two dubias, right? Daily, literally like for 7 days, a dubia, two dubias, just to kind of mentally stable tell them you have an overabundance to go through a gestation process. So I would love to hear your guys' thoughts on that. And I feel that I've I don't want to say I can't say it's more of an opinion. It can't be fact, but it's more of I feel safer, saying that like I've maybe had success using it like those type of methods to make it more of a mental thing as well. So I would love to hear what both of you guys think on that too.
We'll hear from Alex first because he's pretty
Yeah.
quiet.
So for me, I think that makes sense. As I've learned about other species throughout the years, it seems like, you start with smaller follicles, they, over time get bigger, and a lot of that's with food. So I've done, kind of like food cycling after I started my first pairing, and then I'll start that once a week, and then once I get a lock, it's twice a week, 3 times a week. Sometimes, like you said, I'll give them random pinkies, or if I feel another female might be slightly smaller, I'll give her a couple extra treats here and there, or like you, I have random dubia here and there, so adding some of that entices them too, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of helps them get over the hump to ovulate, I think. But I'm still learning.
Well, one thing that you gotta take into consideration that when an animal comes out of its hibernation, like in the wild or its cooling period, there's very little food that's available, in the form of like protein, especially. And as the season progresses and as the breeding season commences and all that, there's usually more prey items that are available, and just duplicating that in captivity, it's just going to benefit the animal and all that. If you give them like one big giant lump of big plate of food, are they going to eat it? Probably, because Tiliquas, they can be gluttons, and I mean, they'll just keep eating and eating and eating. There's sometimes you just can't stop them, and that's not good. It's
Yeah.
Their instincts are kicking in that hey, there's food in front of me. I've got to eat all this, because if I don't, when is my next meal coming? They don't know. They have no idea. They like dogs and cats and all that. They live for the moment.
Yep.
So yeah, you have to regulate that. Small, frequent meals are always
Exactly.
more healthier than as opposed to one large, giant meal, and that applies, like almost every animal out there, So
When I noticed that, like, like in my head, I'm like, when I'm in there, I'm like, this just doesn't seem right. So back then, I used to do, and it's hard, I get it. You have a decent collection, or maybe you have, a day job, or so it's just the mental thinking of just 2 meals a week kind of makes sense. But what I've noticed is, like, and it just doesn't seem right, is like they'll gorge themselves on that meal, but like their poops are giant, and it's like,
yeah.
it just, to me, it's like, I'm like, it doesn't seem right. So I noticed that, like, just giving them a little bit of, because I see, for instance, Ragusa, or Ragusa aspera, like in the wild, they'll go, and you'll see, and they have like it on their mouth majority, and the odds tell me that they're doing it daily. Every time you go, and anytime I see a video of a wild, Ragusa, they open their mouth, and what do you see? You see flowers and a lot of stuff that they're just little bit, and I wouldn't doubt they're not gorging themselves, but they're taking a little bit each day, and I feel like that's more realistic, and that's something I'm learning, is like, that's what I'll do, is like, maybe make their meals a little smaller, but lengthening them than the twice a week, maybe 4 times a week, but maybe one big meal and then the other three like little bits. And I guess that comes with the breeders, like putting in the work to do that. But I feel like it, in my opinion, it's just an opinion, is I feel like it's more beneficial to them.
Oh yeah, yeah. You're not forcing them,
Yeah.
So you're providing what's more natural to them, than what they would experience like in the wild. So it's only going to be beneficial for them, and especially during that that more sensitive time as well too.
Yeah.
After brumation, I've heard some breeders, their males and females wouldn't eat till after breeding. Have you ever had that?
No, no. I will like my males. I'll offer them food probably about maybe about 5 or 6 days after they come out, because I want to hydrate them more than anything, and just just to get them going. Water is more important than food, because they already have enough, body reserves, fat in their tail, any fat they have like internally. So they're a good, I don't want to say overweight animal, but a good healthy lean animal is can handle that for a period of time after they come out. But it's hydrating them first, and then offering like small meals. And the first one, after the first one, they'll probably pick at it, but then by the third or fourth meal, they're starting to take their meals fairly regularly.
Phil, let me ask you, you probably like this one, and I'm sure, Alex, you've probably seen it too. Is It's so funny watching most of them coming out of a brumation. Like, when they go to drink water, it's the process of after brumation, watching them take a drink is just, it's like, wow. It's like when I go to bed dehydrated and I wake up in the middle of the night and I have to like chug a thing of water. They're sitting there, they do, but it's slow. The slow tongue flicks, but they do this thing where it's almost like Jurassic Park, like that. You know that long dinosaur where you just they drink it and then they do this thing where they slowly come up and they're just like letting it fall down. You know what I'm talking about?
It's called relief.
Yeah, exactly. And that's
Yeah.
what I'm intrigued with when I see that. It's like I know the feeling. You guys been down for months, and it's like to watch them take that gulp, and they're so cold, somewhat so cold still.
Yeah.
That they're slowly trying to get it down, and they want it to go down. It's funny.
Yeah, about I would say 10 times out of 10, the day that I bring them out and they're starting to warm up even a little bit. If there's, I put I have a fresh bowl of water available, and once they reach an optimal temperature, they go right for that water bowl and they drink. And
It's a long time.
Yeah, sometimes they'll drink like half that water, and that's fine with me.
Absolutely.
They can do whatever they want.
Have you played at all with shortening and lengthening the brumation cycle to like either for success rate?
No. As far as shortening, no, I don't believe in that. I believe that having at least a good solid 2.5, maybe close to 3 months is plenty for them.
I think that's a little longer than some people I've heard they do closer to 8 weeks for them.
Yeah.
And maybe that's why you've had good success. You're not in a hurry, you're patient, and you're giving them the extra time.
Yeah, I'm not. I am definitely not, impatient on these guys. I guess we kind of all are because we'd love to have babies all the time. But
yeah,
but no, it's just let the animals do their natural thing and just try and provide the best that you can.
And one thing that it's a 2 to and a little bit more, maybe about 3 months of a hibernation or brumation, but it's not just strictly one temperature for that long. I do believe that there's a gradual, for me, it's really like 1 month of a solid cool. But there's on the back ends of that, it's not all just one temperature that long. I'm sure maybe Phil, you feel the same way. It's like there is a real cool period, but it's not that long too. I think there's a gradual aspect to it that's important,
Yeah, for me, I would say like the whole month of October, that's their I'm talking like good solid like 3-4 weeks. That's their gradual period where they're leading up into their cooling period. And then, like I said, come November 1st, it's cold enough that I can, they've been in their cages and their activities completely cease. And then I'll leave them in their cages till about maybe 7-8 days. And then I transport those animals while they're sleeping, especially at night. And then I'll stick them into individual hibernation containers, which I'll be honest with you, which is for me is a 10-gallon tank or a 15-gallon tank because I've got a bunch of them, and I just keep the screen top on it, and I put a very deep layer of aspen bedding, and I make a little like cubby hole like in the middle. Skink's already curled up, put it right on the bottom, cover it over with aspen bedding, and that's it. Nighty night for until like usually about the beginning or about mid-January, I would say. And then what I'll do is that the males, I'll take them out, and then I'll just place them back in their normal cages. But the lights are not, or I should say, the heating elements are not on. And so, and then it'll take like maybe about another week and a half, and then I'll just let them gradually warm up. And then I'll turn the heating elements on the light, and they're ready. They'll start becoming they're a little sluggish at first, but within a couple of days they're pretty much active.
Yeah, it's like, to me it's like I use the example, but it's at a longer period of time because I did I did fish I started with fish when I was a young kid, And I always look at it, it's like acclimating fish when you get fish from a pet store and then bring them to a different temperature in your house, water temp. You got to put the bag in and kind of acclimate. And I feel like it's almost like that with the brumation cycle with some of these cooler climate species, but at a longer period of
Yeah.
time. I think if you can understand how that works, acclimating, it's kind of the same in the same sense, the same thing, the gradual destination point. I feel in a sense.
Yeah. No, I agree with you on that.
So on the opposite side, on the warming up, are you doing like 8 hours of heat right after, like when you after the period for where they're sitting in their cages for a week or so?
Yep. As soon as I turn the lights on, it'll be or the heating elements, it'll be for 8 hours, and then it gradually will. I mean, I don't know. It probably takes like about maybe close to month and a half, 2 months, and I'll raise it all the way up to 14 hours.
Wow.
Do you track your ambient temps at all throughout that, or?
Yeah, I've got thermometers like all over the place. I got little electronic thermometers like with an indoor outdoor probe, and I'm literally, I mean, they're everywhere. So if I start in one area, I can walk around and I can tell, okay, is it getting colder over here? Is it too warmer or something like that? But yeah, I'm always looking at those things just to make sure that nothing's getting overheated or getting too cold.
Are you able to like micromanage that all to an extent? Like, do you
Yeah.
have cages on dimmers or?
As far as like the heating aspect.
Well, or just to make it cooler, whether.
Yeah, it's easier to do a cooler because that time of year it's still winter here. Like by you, we have like almost 6 months of winter out of the year, and all I got to do is just open like a window or just not have I've got some baseboard heaters, not turn them up as high, if or turn them up. It just all depends.
Yeah, that's how I look at it. It's like mental mindset is understanding how to macro manage and micro manage. So, like for instance, your window move was a macro manage, and then if anything on the inside of the cage is more of like a micro manage. So, like that's those things you kind of fine tune to make the process work. So, like for instance, like for me, I strategically did it. I have exhaust fans. So, being that during wake up, but right now it's like it gets real hot from all the lighting elements and stuff like that, and all that kind of heat kind of rises and kind of stays around there. But I want to start cooling, and I macro manage to not have to use my air condition. I have timers set on exhaust fans leading outside the house that it pulls out, and I actually have it set on a thermostat. So right now it's kind of leading into summer, so my night temps are in that 72 range, maybe could get 73. Middle of summer, it's going to get that 74 at night. But during fall, I have it set probably in that 67, 68 range. My night temps drop. But those day temps are getting really warm too. So being able to macro manage that, plays a big role. I would say it's like puppet on a string. You got to make sure that all the strings are functioning for the puppet to run.
Yeah, and obviously having if it's excuse me, um, fresh air coming in through via windows or something like that, and have a fan running as well too, or even like 2 or 3 fans, not blasted high or something like that, but just having good air movement. And it's good for the animals, good for your cages especially, and it really moves the circulating air around, and it's just so much better.
Yeah, fans help definitely during summer too, because
Yeah.
over here, and I'm sure over you guys, it kind of gets like in a subtropical, and that humidity will spike like crazy. So air conditioning helps, but a good fan to kind of circulate that air really plays a big role for sure.
Yeah.
Now, Phil, this might not affect you at all. Do you have to run dehumidifiers in your house at all?
Currently, no, but because I work with a lot of desert species of lizards too, like Uromastyx, and I think that has a certain effect on my uh, the rooms that I keep my animals in that. But uh, in the early days and all that, I remember I had a small dehumidifier going, but and it wasn't going all the time, but that uh, those years I can remember we had more precipitation. It was way more a lot of good uh, you know rainstorms or thunderstorms rolling through all the time. So last year definitely not, because we went through a drought. So but things are kind of flipping around right now, and we're really starting to get the rain now. So
Yeah.
we just got dumped on last night. And we're tomorrow's like all thunderstorms. So, but even with that, it's not so much that it's going to start causing mold or anything like that. To grow in cages. I would never let that happen.
I think humidity, I mean, obviously not crazy high, but I think humidity does play a beneficial factor. And I've noticed that, sometimes it's a pain for me, and I'm sure maybe you guys, like, to be honest with you, dorm wake up, we're technically still in winter. So what happens is, we have those heaters on, and it's just pulling all that moisture out of the air, and it gets so dry that, having good humid boxes play a role. But like when you get into those summer months, when it starts to get when the humidity starts to come into play, it helps. I feel their belly scales are much I think a little bit more better. I think I do believe it plays it's beneficial in a sense, and I just feel that stagnant air isn't the greatest thing. I don't think it's a good thing at all. So having those fans play a big role, but I don't think humidity is the worst thing in the world.
Oh no, not at all. But
Yeah.
even like prior to the breeding season, and even after that, like in the mornings, I have uh, like a 2 gallon pump sprayer, and I spray all my lizards and gecko cages, and even the skink cages. I just
Yep.
give them a good spray. That way they have it. They got that little extra humidity in their cage. If there's an animal that's going in the shed, I'll take that nozzle and just spray that
Yep.
animal for a couple minutes, and the substrate will stay relatively damp. So that way that it just helps in the process of shedding.
Yeah,
And
that's what's happening.
they
Yeah.
need it, especially like on their toes.
Yep.
So it's good to do mix it up, give them some variety.
Yeah, I think right now for me, I'm going into that seasonal shed, that summer shed. So everybody's
Yeah,
in shed right now. So that's what I find myself doing, is giving a good spray. Sometimes some could have a little bit of trouble. I've noticed with occipitalis, they have those little, much smaller kind of hands that, sometimes it's a little tougher. I feel like cork bark plays a big role with helping that, being able to climb and kind of scrape it off. But,
yeah,
it's just micromanaging, being able to, see what goes on and saying, hey, we got to make an adjustment here.
yeah.
Do one thing you guys mentioned earlier, do all female occipitalis like mock bite when you're trying to breed?
Well, for me, all the females I've ever seen, they want to initially and all that. They just want to rip that male
Yeah.
apart. Yeah, they're pretty temperamental, and then they get in a real mood, and they'll actually go after your hand too. So
So
it's
I figured out, and I've talked about this with Dave and Dave Sutton. I really it put things into play, and maybe if there's anybody else out there that feels, and I'd love to hear both your insight, is especially with occipitalis, is they throw that bluff, and I wonder. To me, it feels as if like they're saying, they're throwing a bluff to say, hey, I want, a dominant male to have my, be a part of my progeny. Like the babies that I produce, I want them to be vigorous and strong genetics. And I feel like that bluff is to weed the duds out, the weak males. And I feel, a dominant, experienced male, and I've noticed, I'm sure Phil, you've seen this with occipitalis, is they don't play games. Like they'll see the bluff, and it's almost like they're laughing. Like, nah, I don't really care. Like I'm gonna come right at you, and and it's like a bulldozer. It's like boom, and then all of a sudden you watch the female, she goes from to this. Misses. She's like goes into a total submissive mode, and it's like, okay, I like this male. I'm gonna let this happen, and then it happens, and you know, Phil, that it's like they go into this trance state where the male will just hang on, and once they breed, they hang on in a corner somewhere, and it's almost like they're in a trance state, and I wouldn't doubt it makes sense, and I've seen this with the Niger Latia too. Is they might not have another shot, so they'll hold on, regain energy, and then go for another lock. And that second lock's a big. Having 2 locks in one session is it could be big. You never know. And again, I've learned this from Dave, and I think it's amazing. It's very interesting. And I don't know if he learned it from somebody else. Is when you're introducing and breeding, it's more for the people that are introducing. Is he used to mark R and L. And it's interesting, it would be for left hemipene and right hemipene. Yeah. So because you never know, the right might not be firing. And if you're writing it as a note to say, R, the next day, try to shoot in a position where he could get that left hemipene, because you just don't know, maybe one's not firing. So it's interesting just trying to make it all come together. But I find that bluffing actually very interesting. It's kind of funny. And that's why I like that I have that experienced male, to the type of male that says, hey, you're not ready, or I still don't care. I'm going to go for it.
Yeah, that's just one more check against us when it comes to reproducing these things. You have righties and lefties. And you don't know until you actually throw them in together. And it's got to be the right female, for either a righty or a lefty.
Yeah. Yeah, they have their more dominant side, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's definitely true.
All right, so I don't know if we're almost done, but I got my last question for you, Phil.
All right.
I know it's not to get it out of you. It might be hard, but what's your favorite Tiliqua?
Oh, God.
Put you on the spot.
Well, that's really hard to say, because I've honestly had the privilege of working with all of them except for it's just, my mind's running a blank here. The small one.
The
multifasciata?
No. It's the Adeliensis.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because they're CITES 1.
Yeah. Well,
but
those
anyway,
ones are extinct, right?
Huh?
They were once extinct, or is that?
That's the Adeliensis. Well, they thought it was extinct, but there's actually huge.
So small.
There's huge colonies of them, and they're all protected. Anyway, oh boy, that is a really tough one, but I think because of how much time that I put in with the Alpines, they definitely are probably up at the top. But I still really like all of them. I mean,
I appreciate the honest answer.
Yeah, and it's and I'm not so much a morph guy, but I look at what they're doing with what they have been doing with some of the Niger Latias, like down in Australia, like pure melanistic and these crazy ones.
Yeah, Joe Ball, right? I think.
Yeah, Joe Ball. What he's been doing with them, I mean, it's really cool. And then you see like the Easterns and the Northerns. There's just some really outrageous looking ones, and it's not affecting. I mean, I wouldn't say 100%, but it's not really affecting their health or anything. But there's just, it's like living art, and they're just beautiful animals. But I don't know. I guess I would just say, the Niger Latias, the true Alpines, but I'll tell you what, there is just still nothing that really can compare to a fresh baby Hospitalis when it's born.
It's
because
so true.
The colors that it has, it's almost a type of olive greenish, little bit faded out mustard yellow.
Yeah, it's enhanced.
White markings, and it only lasts for a couple days, and then boom, it's gone. And there's, all the lizards that I've, either had or I've, seen in publications or I've seen in person and all that, baby Hospitalis is in a class all its own. So
I agree.
and I've seen, baby multifasciatus before, and, I mean, holy cats, they're crazy too, but, they're just all so unique, and they're all just in, I mean, gee, I wish I could, have them all again, but moved to Australia.
Yeah.
Right?
I don't know. I feel like um, mine is probably the Alpines too, and it's more. I mean, obviously personality too, but it's more sentimental because a lot of
Yeah,
people were like, you can't do it. It's so hard. They need to be kept cool, and it was more or less like, nah, I want to take that challenge. I want to be able to try to do it, and I stuck with it, and I'm sure Phil, you've done the same thing. Alex, you have them too, so you're next. Don't
yeah,
don't
you're
give
you're
up.
on the
Keep
way.
going.
You're
Yeah.
on the way. I'm going to tell you this right now. Once you have them, you're hooked, dude. You're never gonna you will not get rid of them, and they will become your kids. And I mean, they're just when you have a fresh baby Niagara Latia in your hands, you're like, that's it. I mean, there's nothing else in the world that you're on cloud nine. I mean, you really are.
It's an emotional feeling too, man. I
Yeah,
know Phil and
yeah,
I talked about that.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
I heard from Dave. He'd say it's that feeling like you're weak in the knees, you know?
yep, yeah.
Yeah. So
And then when you have like, if you have like a litter of like 4 or 5 babies and all that, and they're all flicking their tongues at you and all that, right,
yeah.
right from the
Yep.
get go, man, there is nothing like that. So
Yep.
yeah,
Maybe next year.
You'll get it. You'll get it,
Yeah, I know.
Alex.
I'm not giving up.
Yeah.
oh,
Good.
yeah, do not give up. Patience and endurance. You'll achieve that. You'll get to that point. Guarantee you that.
Yep. There's no better feeling.
What's odd on my male, and I don't know, you probably not tried. It seems like he doesn't like his own kind. Meaning he
So he
would,
doesn't like other females or something, or
yeah, both female alpines he wouldn't breed.
uh-huh.
So out of curiosity, I temporarily put him with a northern, and he would instantly try to breed the northern. I separated them so they didn't get the job done, but
Yeah,
I just
some
wonder if
other,
it's the females. That's what that could
yeah,
be a sign. I always think that there's a sign that maybe it's the females because usually if a male is in his window and the female is in hers, it is usually nothing stopping him, and especially if he's trying to breed an intermedia. I'm sure if a female's in her window. But I know you were telling me, Alex, that you saw like little tail wiggles and certain signs.
yeah, it seemed like the females were doing the right things. Maybe they were still a little behind, but I kept trying for a bit, and for whatever reason, he never liked them.
hmm.
And what's
Interesting.
odd, the northern girl was probably past her cycle or near the end because I pair those a lot earlier.
I don't know. That's interesting.
Well, since we're coming up to the 2 hour mark, um, I guess for my final question for you, Phil, what's the 5 year plan?
The 5 year plan.
Yeah.
Uh, well, to keep breeding these guys, and um, oh boy, still trying to you know learn about these about Tiliquas and about a lot of other different lizard species, and uh, you know looking for different newer projects. But I've got a pretty good base of what I've always wanted to work with, and I'm continuing to do that. But again, it's just not cut and dry. So there's some projects in that it's a big learning curve,
Oh
and
yeah.
yeah, hopefully, I guess within 5 years, I'll have some babies running around out of those, projects. But yeah, time will only tell. But no, it's to me, it's the experience and learning. That's what it's always about, and really enjoying these, pretty cool creatures.
Yeah, that was good.
And also meeting pretty cool individuals as well too, like you guys. So
Oh, thanks, Phil.
There is
This is a great talk.
out there.
Enjoyed this, and Alex, thank you again for giving us the opportunity for sure. I think it's important.
Thank you,
There's not
Alex.
many. Yeah.
Well, thank you for coming on. You both have a great rest of your night, and I'll talk to you in the future.
Okay. Have a good one.
See you guys. See you, Phil.